Hello, my name's Tom Singer, and this is Concert Cues for the concert coming up on October 9th, Saturday, called Spanish Nights. Concert certainly has an international flavor. You'll hear some of that when I try to pronounce the names that I'm about to. Our guest guitarist is Rafael Aguirre, and our guest conductor is François López-Ferrer. I got close, I hope. All right. So, interesting concert, interesting program. I'm going to start by asking our conductor, did you have anything to do with picking this music, or did you get it handed to you?
Well, actually, I'm very, they always say one's misfortune is another person's fortune. So I'm the person with the fortunate situation here because a colleague of mine, a very good Spanish conductor, James Antonia, he had to cancel because of visa issues coming in from Spain. So I work out in Ohio, in Cincinnati, with the Cincinnati Symphony, and I got a call from the president of the orchestra, Ignacio, and they invited me out to replace my colleague. So I'm very happy to be here. The program was already set, but it's all music that I know and love dearly with all my heart, and I'm so happy to get to do it here in Billings, and especially with Rafael.
So you and Rafael have some interesting little connections, I understand. Rafael, you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, I played with his father, Jesus López Cos, in 2016 in Valladolid, in the region Castilla y León, where he was from, and we recorded a CD together, and then he recommended me for my probably one of the most important concerts in my career at the Verbier Festival, where I played also this piece, Aranjuez, in 2016. And we were supposed to, he wanted to play this piece with me also in Frankfurt in Germany, but the concert didn't happen. And unfortunately, he passed away sometime after. And recently I met François in Madrid, and where I live. And we had no idea that we would play together like some months later in Montana. So I was already, yeah, who would have thought?
We said it'll happen soon, that's for sure. How soon? We had no idea it would be a few months later.
But I'm very happy since I had a very nice relationship with his father, and I find him also a very nice person, and there is a nice chemistry also, and I'm so much looking forward to start the rehearsals with him.
Yeah. So the piece that you're playing, I'm losing that name, Rodrigo, right?
Yes.
And let's talk a little bit about that piece first, because with regard to your own history with it, because it goes back a ways.
Yes. This is a piece that, Rodrigo was blind. That's very important to know. He was blind, I think, from the age of 4 or something like that. And he was married to Victoria Kami, a Turkish pianist, and they met in Paris because he studied composition in Paris with Paul Dukas. And so they really loved to go to this palace, which is around 30 or 40 miles from Madrid. It's a royal palace of Aranjuez. And they loved to have nice walks on this garden. So Victoria, his wife, was always explaining to him, what they were watching, the flowers, the palace, the birds, everything. And Rodrigo was a very imaginative person. So at some point, Victoria was pregnant. They were waiting a child, and unfortunately, she couldn't give birth to this, so they lost the child. And Rodrigo was writing this concerto. We have to say that it was not very typical to write pieces for guitar and orchestra, because of the volume of the instrument and everything, and we don't have like pieces by Beethoven, Mozart, and Brahms, and all these great composers didn't write for guitar. So it was the guitarist Regino Sainz de la Maza, who lived also in Madrid, who asked him really many, many times to write this piece. So Rodrigo was already writing his piece, and when he knew about the passing of his children, he wrote this very famous, beautiful adagio on the piano, because he never played the guitar. That's very important to know. That's why the piece is so difficult to play, because of course some things on the piano are very difficult to play on the guitar. And it's very interesting because it's a very nostalgic and sad melody, which is inspired on a rhythm from Andalusia called saeta, which is a music that I'm from Andalusia, where we sing it. It's part of the flamenco, where we sing it on Holy Week. How do you say it?
Yeah, that's
Pascua,
right.
no?
Yeah,
Holy Week
Holy
before
Week, yeah.
Easter.
And there's usually a person singing on a balcony for the whole people on the street, so it's very traditional. And at the end of the movement, the guitar plays some harmonics, which they say that represents his child going into heaven. So it's very mystic, very poetical, but it's a piece that has a first and third movement. The first movement is like a Spanish celebration, a fiesta, you know, it's a bulería rhythm. And the third movement is more like an aristocratic a dance, maybe on the palaces of the 18th century of Aranjuez. So it's a very good portrait of Spanish music in three parts that became probably one of the most played music or pieces in classical music repertoire.
Yeah. So what's your experience with the piece and thoughts about it?
Well, actually, I've been extremely lucky with this piece because the first time I conducted it was in my previous job in South America in Chile with a National Symphony Orchestra where I lived for about 5 years. And I got to do with the great Pepe Romero, also from Malaga. And then I recently did it in Cincinnati with a very well-known guitarist, Pablo Sainz Villegas. Now I get to do it with Rafael Aguirre, and then in December I'm doing it with another very well-known guitarist, Milos. So it's kind of a concerto that's followed me around quite a bit, and I'm very happy to do it. Also, my father had a good relationship with Rodrigo. He knew him, and it's just a huge pleasure to be able to continue that tradition. And it's very peculiar because just one thing to add to what Rafael said, I mean, Rodrigo's music sounds nothing like Shostakovich, but it's in a sense our Spanish Shostakovich because this piece, the Aranjuez Concerto, was written in 1939, so just I think it was 1 year after the end of the Spanish Civil War. So he couldn't choose provocative themes in that sense, so he chose something that was very Spanish, very rooted in tradition, not to offend the Francoist regime, which is the Palacio de Aranjuez, which is the summer palace of King Philip II, built in the 16th century, then rebuilt in the 18th and 19th centuries. So it's very interesting in that sense because also the fact that it was dedicated, the second movement, to the unborn child, this miscarriage that they had. It's very. It wasn't known at the time. He didn't really share that, and that kind of came out later, I think, from his wife that spoke about it, but much after the piece was written. So it's very kind of secretive. It's very deceptively sort of beautiful, melancholic, and light Spanish colors. But actually, there's a lot of depth in this piece of music.
Was he anti-Franco? Was he trying to express that? I mean,
no, not at all. In that sense, he was just trying to. He was a composer. I mean, a lot of composers just simply wanted to write music. I mean, Rodrigo was not by any means in his music a political composer at all. Okay. It's just kind of.
I was just curious because of the comparison to Shostakovich.
No, so
but I see what you mean.
In that sense, it wasn't like he wasn't. It wasn't music that was trying to hide anything specific. Just simply not trying to be provocative. Yeah, so Shostakovich did the opposite. He was very provocative in his music, but deceptively in a way to hide his real perspectives.
Right. It's an interesting comparison, and I love the story about the dedication of it. That's fascinating. For you personally, this piece, this was your first orchestral piece that you ever played. Mm-hmm. When was that?
That was 20 years ago in 2001, the beginning of the 21st century, of our century. So I was studying in Malaga, my hometown, and the story with the piece is I used to hear this piece, just for fun, maybe 3, 4, or 5 times a day while I was playing with the computer. So I heard it, like a pop song, heard it. So I learned it by heart. So I was singing, whistling, and then my teacher approached me when I was 16 and said, there is one tour, would you like to play with the Malaga Youth Orchestra in Andalusia and in Morocco? But if you want to play it, you have to make an audition for the conductor in 10 days. So I never played the concerto. So I started to sight read it, and I noticed that it was very easy to sight read because I always knew the next note, you know, because by that time I had like perfect pitch, so I already knew the next note, the next note. I have to say I have lost a little bit my perfect pitch now. I don't know why. Maybe too many planes. I don't know. And so I learned it. I played for this Estonian conductor, but educated in Russia. He was very Russian, and I remember him very serious. You can start, you know. And then I play everything, and then he say, "It was great. You will do the tour, you know." And the tour was very successful, and I played like I don't know 10 or 12 times the concerto. So it was a very very good school on how to play kind of chamber music. I mean, with other children that are, you know, starting to play the flute, the oboe, the English horn, the violins, you know. And we had always to fix every bar, you know, because we were all so young. And now, of course, when I get to play this concerto with the best orchestras, it's like being in a Rolls Royce. You know, everything works perfectly. It's like there's nothing to do. You know, you just have to let the music sound and enjoy. You know, watch the conductor, and that's it. Yeah.
And you know, one really peculiar thing is when doing this concerto, usually you have one rehearsal without the soloist, just to put things together. But so you make sure that the orchestra understands what's going on, especially if the orchestra hasn't played it before, and it's a commonly played concerto around the world. But you know, an orchestra will, you know, any given orchestra will program it maybe once every 5-10 years or so. So you know, they can be forgetful, let's say. Sure. But the interesting thing is, once you put it together without the soloist, it lacks a certain flavor because it's such a soloistic piece. I mean, it doesn't exist at all without the solo part. Especially thematically speaking. So the guitar starts the concerto for like, I don't know, it plays 30 seconds or so without the orchestra interceding, just the basses on the bass note, and but then when you start with the soloist, then the orchestra immediately changes the flavor. They pick up they pick up the feeling and the sense of the work, regardless of what culture it is. If it's an American orchestra, Latin American orchestra, Spanish, European, whatever, they immediately get the sense of it, and it's really interesting to see how that growth occurs, just having the presence of the soloist there.
Yeah. Well, we're recording this on Wednesday, and you're performing on Saturday. I understand you had your first rehearsal last night.
I had the rehearsal just alone with the orchestra, so we put everything together, made sure that tomorrow when Rafa joins us, that it'll work immediately. But it'll be so interesting to see how the orchestra, just listening to how Rafa plays the concerto, I'm more than sure, will influence the sound in the end.
Yeah. Very interesting. You also mentioned to us a little bit earlier that this particular performance has a particular importance to you, and what's that?
Well, I have performed many times in the U.S. My first concert was in New Orleans in 2008, and then I have performed in around, I don't know, 11 or 12 states. But it's my first time in Montana and my first time with an orchestra in the U.S. So it's my U.S. orchestral debut with a piece that I know very well, that I have played even in the Aranjuez Palace itself. I have played it once. And yeah, it was something I was joking, like on my checklist, you know, to do. And
so your U.S. premiere is with the Billings Symphony Orchestra. Wow, how did that happen? I mean, is that chance or was that by design?
Well, it's a chance that I know Ignacio for, I don't know, almost 10 years. And by the time he was in another sector, he was on the energetic sector. He's an engineer also, but he also plays the cello. And suddenly one day he tells me, I'm going to be the executive director of the Billings Symphony. He was living before in Los Angeles, I remember. And so my agent, who is also a common friend, you know, they started to have conversations. I had no idea about that, and suddenly, you know, let's go to Billings.
You've got a gig in Montana.
Exactly.
Well, welcome to Montana.
Thank you.
I hope you get a chance to spend a little time. You're going to be able to go to Bozeman for a master class, I understand.
And to Yellowstone, hopefully.
I get to see a little of Yellowstone Park. Hope that you beat the snow. That's the. It's more likely there than it is here, apparently. Not apparently, always. So let's take a little detour and talk about the other pieces that are on this program for just a minute. We've got all Spanish-sounding composers, the names, De Falla, Inistera, and I'm missing one, Goyesca is the name
And
of the
Granados.
Granados,
yes,
yeah.
the
So,
intermezzo.
quick thoughts about those three pieces and what's special to you about them?
Well, you know, the interesting thing about this whole program that puts it together, that it's all either based on folk tunes, folk music, native to Argentina. Ginastera was Argentinian, with a Catalan mother specifically. De Falla, he actually passed away in Argentina, so there's that kind of interesting connection. And then also there's this tremendous French influence throughout the whole program, because I mean, Rodrigo studied with Paul Dukas, the composer of The Sorcerer's Apprentice in Paris. De Falla moved at the beginning of the 20th century to Paris and spent a lot of time there. With also Paul Dukas was a good friend, Maurice Ravel, who had also a Basque mother, a Spanish mother. Debussy, who was a great admirer of Spain and Spanish landscapes. He wrote many pieces in homage to Spanish culture and Spanish sounds. And so there's this connection to like the folk sounds of Spain and Argentina, but also to dance music. Because all of these pieces are somehow, except for the intermezzo, which is simply, the intermezzo by Granados is a short, really sweet piece that was composed, just as a brief detour, was composed at the last minute because he had turned his piano suite, Goyescas, into a one-act opera. And when they were rehearsing it at the Metropolitan Opera, there was a changeover that took too long, so you couldn't keep the public just sitting there. So he composed it very, very quickly after one of the rehearsals. So it ended up being one of the most commonly played sections of the opera around. So it's interesting how that
a really
happened.
nice little piece to kick off the concert.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's also Francisco Goya was a Romance a painter, but it's very dark hues, dark colors. It's very colorful, but with a lot of darkness in his paintings, and you get the sense of that in this piece. It's really, really beautiful. But the rest of the program is all dance music, but dance music not for the sake of dance, but descriptive of dance flavors, if that makes sense. Except in the case of Ginastera, which is really literal malambo. I mean, this pompous. You know, it was only danced by men, the gauchos, the cowboys of Argentina, that were showing their prowess and masculinity, and especially there's this great the last movement. We're playing two movements of the four-movement Estancia suite, right. Or the ranch.
Ranch,
estancia,
right?
Exactly. Yeah. And the second movement is the dance of the danza del trigo, the dance of wheat. So it's the morning. Sunrise with the wind and how it caresses the crops of wheat plants, and with a beautiful flute solo. It's just a really very beautiful little gem. And then the fourth movement, the malambo, is this pompous dance, and I just love it every time. I've done this many times also, especially with in young people's concerts and things like that, because they get such a kick out of guessing when the two stomps come. Bam, 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 bam. It's great to turn around to the public and get them to stomp along with you as well. So it's a really, really fun thing. So I'm really excited about this program. I mean, it's very, I was not born in Spain, but my father was Spanish. My mother's side also was Cuban, but Spanish, and from the 19th century. So I feel a very, very strong, obvious connection to Spain and its culture, and I love spending time there. I have lots of friends there, also new friends as well, like Rafa. And every time that I get to make music with Spanish orchestras or conduct Spanish music, I feel like I learn something more about myself and my upbringing.
So I want to get back to you, Rafael, for just a second about a project that you got, a recording. There's things going on outside of Billings, Montana that I'd like you to have us tell a little about.
Projects, yes. Well, I'm very excited. I'm going to play this concerto with the National Orchestra of Spain in next February, which of course be in Spanish. My first time with them. I think François already conducted them a couple of times or so, no?
We did all the rehearsals, and the concert got canceled because of the snowstorm of the century
yes,
in Spain.
that was a huge thing in Madrid, you know, because there's not so much snow like in Billings, but this year it was really a lot. So I have a concert coming up now with the orchestra of the Svizzera Italiana in Lugano in Switzerland. And then I have a very nice concert next year in Sao Paulo, Brazil, with the main orchestra of the country, doing another Rodrigo. The last one that he composed is called Concierto para una fiesta, that he composed for a very rich family in Texas, for the wedding of their daughter. And
it sounds like an interesting schedule.
Yes.
We've used up our time. The orchestra now needs to warm up. So we're going to let them do that before the concert. Very nice talking to you both, Rafael, Francois. Thank you for taking the time to visit with me.
Thank you.
for having us.
Thank you.